Oftentimes, when the fall of the Western Roman Empire is depicted in documentaries or history books, it is said that the territory was overrun by Germanic invaders. This paints a very simple and clear picture. We had on the one hand the Romans, who defended their old crumbling empire, fighting against a massive onslaught of barbarians. But then in the end, they were overwhelmed by the sheer number of these countless Germanic nations that just kept on pouring into Roman lands like a force of nature. But this view, dear friends of Roman history, is a gross oversimplification. Because in reality, the situation was utterly chaotic and complex. Indeed, oftentimes there were Germanics fighting alongside Romans, nay, sometimes even only Germanics, defending Roman cities and Roman civilians, and to make it even crazier, many times there were Romans fighting for barbarians. In this video, we are going to talk about some of the most bizarre instances where Romans fought for barbarians and barbarians for Romans. The line between Romans and Germanics began to blur already surprisingly early. As early as in the 310s, quite large numbers of Franks were started to be recruited into the ranks of the Roman army by the Emperor Constantine. These Frankish foederati, federate soldiers, would be formidable fighters and would be key in his many later victories, especially so during the Battle of the Milvian Bridge against the other Roman Emperor Maxentius, a battle which Constantine famously won. After these initial successes, word of the effectiveness and fighting prowess of these Germanic warriors traveled fast, and so already 40 years later, in the mid-350s, telling a Roman army apart from a Germanic one was already very difficult. So much so that in the defensive wars of the Emperor Julian in Gaul, where he decisively fought back Alemannic invasions, the inhabitants of a city confused the army of the Roman Emperor with that of the Alemanni and fled in panic behind the city walls until they realized that this had been a Roman army. This account is very surprising, especially because it happened relatively early in the 350s. Indeed, the Emperor Julian employed a lot of Frankish soldiers in his army, and Nevita, a Frank, would even become his bodyguard and trusted friend. In the early 390s already, a Frank called Arbogast became Magister Militum, which was the highest military rank in the Western Roman Empire, and he would even appoint a Western Roman Emperor. In the early 400s, this highest military rank of the Western Roman Empire was held by a certain Flavius Stilicho, and as his non-Roman sounding name suggests, he was a half-Vandal. But he was very much a Roman at heart. And this half-Vandal was the greatest defender of the Western Roman Empire of that time. He defeated numerous Germanic invaders into the Italian heartland. It was only after he was treacherously murdered on commands of the Western Roman Emperor himself that Rome would be sacked for the first time in 800 years. In the following decades of the 5th century, as the Western Roman Empire slowly started disintegrating, the situation became even more complex. Because now we would see quite often not only Germanics fighting in the name of the Roman Empire as foederati or as generals, but we would now sometimes even see Romans fighting for the Germanics. For instance, when the Vandals crossed into Africa in 429 AD, they had Roman help, because most of the Germanic invaders, believe it or not, did not know how to build ships. So there must have been Roman collaborators who taught the Vandals how to build ships, and nay, even more, probably built ships for them, and even navigated the ships for them. Without Roman help, the Vandals would have never been able to cross the Strait of Gibraltar into Africa. So in the end, it was Romans themselves who would doom the Western Roman Empire, because the loss of the province of Africa to the Vandals is possibly the greatest disaster that the Western Roman Empire had to endure up to that point. And it is actually from that point onwards that the real downward spiral had begun for the West, since the loss of this rich province would mean a severe reduction in tax revenue for the Western Roman Empire. And less tax revenue meant less money to recruit new legions or even to upkeep existing armies. So in that insane case, the Romans handed the keys to the very heart of the Western Roman Empire itself to the barbarians willingly on a silver platter. But there are even more such insane cases. For instance, in 455, when the Vandals were sailing for Rome, 26 years after they had crossed into Africa and conquered that formerly Roman province, it is absolutely clear that they were helped by many Romans of Africa. Their fleet was built by Romans, and many of these sailors were Romans as well. And even though we have no direct evidence, I personally wouldn't even be surprised if Romans of Africa were present during the sack of Rome, and that they even helped the Vandals in the sack, looting themselves whatever they could find, seeing this city Rome as just another city to loot from. So far estranged had they possibly become from the idea of the old Roman Empire by that time. And now to something different, the SPQR Shop. They make amazing rings, amazing pendants, attributes, terracottas, coin replicas. They make a lot of wonderful replicas of Roman items, and it's all 100% handcrafted. Let me tell you, the level of craftsmanship is absolutely incredible. You can even buy the one and only Maiorianus ring, and you can only get it on the SPQR Shop. But there are of course many other rings and amazing items that the SPQR Shop crafts with an incredible attention to detail. And with a code in the description, you will get a 20%, I repeat, a 20% price reduction on every purchase on the SPQR Shop. So don't hesitate and buy something nice for you or someone else as a present who also happens to like Roman history. Thanks for your attention, and back to the video. Maybe many of them saw life in the new Germanic kingdoms in some form even preferable to life in the old Roman Empire. Slaves were certainly most willing and even happy to join the Germanics, as they hadn't enjoyed basic human rights in the Roman Empire. Why should slaves help this empire that had taken everything from them? They were most happy to see Rome sacked, and it is quite likely that many Roman slaves happily participated in the sack of Rome in 455 AD, helping the Vandals where they could. But another example of Romans helping barbarians were the Bacchaudai rebels. These were bands of former Roman slaves, peasants and other members of the lowest classes who had armed themselves often with makeshift weapons of their own creation or with looted weapons, and fighting a guerrilla-style war against the Roman army and terrorizing the countryside. For instance, the first mention of the later Emperor Maiorianus is when he was fighting against these Bacchaudai rebels in 447 AD alongside the Magister Militum Flavius Aetius. These Bacchaudai oftentimes joined forces with the Germanic invaders and even helped them to loot countryside villas and wreak havoc. They certainly preferred life in these new Germanic kingdoms as opposed to life in the former Roman Empire, where they had enjoyed very little rights and were treated most unfairly. It is thus of course very logical that the lowest classes were often very quick to join the Germanic invaders, and this also explains the sometimes surprising ease with which these many barbarian nations could invade the Western Roman Empire. Of course, the Romans themselves being engaged in constant civil wars, with Roman army fighting against Roman army while the barbarians were looting, certainly was also less than ideal and greatly helped the invaders as well. But there are also many examples of high-ranking Romans actively helping the Germanic invaders. For instance, the Gallo-Roman aristocrat Arvandus betrayed his fellow Romans when he secretly helped the Visigoths under their king Euric, sending a letter to Euric and revealing the location of a Brythonic army that the Emperor Anthemius had personally called for to help in his fight against the Visigoths. But Arvandus, hoping to gain the favor of the Visigoths, betrayed the Romans, and thus this Brythonic army was defeated in 471 because its location was revealed, marking a serious blow to the Western Roman Empire. For that, Arvandus was arrested and almost executed, but only by a persuasion of Sidonius Apollinaris himself, the famous Gallo-Roman poet and aristocrat, was the punishment changed into exile. Another example would be the Roman senator Romanus, who was senator at Rome under the Western Roman Emperor Anthemius. In 470, the emperor fell seriously ill and almost died, and he suspected Romanus of having poisoned him. Because Romanus was a friend and ally of none other than the barbarian Magister Militum Ricima, a half-Suevi, half-Visigoth who had managed to ascend to the highest military position of the Western Roman Empire. And Ricima certainly behaved in a way where we could say that he secretly helped the Germanics, especially the Visigoths, to which he had strong blood ties. So the fact that the Roman senator, this Romanus, was actively helping a Germanic with Germanic interests against the Western Roman Emperor, even going possibly as far as trying to kill him, maybe on instigation of Ricima, shows how far some Romans were willing to go only to gain personal favors with the Germanics. For his suspected treachery, Romanus was executed in 470 on orders of Anthemius, and this would then lead to the civil war with Ricimer, which unfortunately cost Anthemius his life. But even later, this trend still continued. In 473 AD, during the reign of the Western Roman Emperor Glucerius, a Visigothic army invaded Italy. Previously, these Visigoths, under their king Euric, had already managed to conquer the prestigious city of Arelate and other cities along the southern Gallic coast. But in 473, a Visigothic army had entered Italy under command of a Roman called Vincentius. To make matters even more bizarre, Italy was defended by two Germanic military commanders called Alla and Sindila. So a Roman commander attacks Italy, but Italy is being defended by two Germanic commanders. Alla and Sindila won, Vincentius was defeated and killed, and thus was Italy saved from this Visigothic incursion. Glucerius actually also prevented another invasion by the Ostrogoths by paying them off. So this emperor actually saved Italy twice from invasion, for which I want to give him credit, because he was actually not a bad emperor, especially considering the times he reigned in. So we see how insanely complex the situation had become. Oftentimes Romans helped and fought alongside barbarians against the Roman Empire, while at other times barbarians fought for the Roman Empire, defending it against other barbarians. It was a truly chaotic time, and this is why the fall of the Western Roman Empire is such a complex topic that is all too often, unfortunately, grossly oversimplified. The truth is oftentimes more messy and unstraightforward than we humans would like. We would like simple truths and simple realities, good and bad, 0 and 1, but the times when Romans fought for barbarians and barbarians for Romans shows us that reality is always more complicated than we would like to believe. If you like this video, please consider supporting this channel via Patreon or via YouTube membership, because it is your support which makes this channel possible. You would have my utmost gratitude, and I would especially like to thank our new Sol Invictus supporter, Grant Robinson. Thank you so much, Grant Robinson, for supporting this channel in such a generous way. You, sir, are a true hero of the Western Roman Empire. And I would also like to thank our new Restitutor Orbis member, Sam Mohan. Thank you so much, Sam Mohan, for your generous support of Maiorianus. I really cannot thank you enough. And I would also like to thank our new Kaisar supporter, Winter Knight 95. Thank you so much, Winter Knight 95, for your support of the channel. And of course, I want to thank everybody who is supporting the channel in any form. You people are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And if you want to learn more about the Emperor Anthemius, an, in my opinion, very underrated emperor, you can watch this video in the upper right corner. But if you want to learn more about why I dislike Ricimer so much, you can watch the very first video I ever made on this channel in the lower right corner. I say thanks again to all friends of Roman history, gratias tibiago and bene valete.